Cities are a lot like people. They go through periods of growth, struggle, reinvention, and renewal. In the late 20th century, as businesses abandoned the Johannesburg CBD and confidence in the city faded, one man saw something different. Not decline, but potential. Gerald Olitzki spent decades investing in a future that many believed would never arrive. Through persistence, vision, and an unwavering belief in Johannesburg, he helped transform some of the city's most neglected spaces into thriving urban precincts. Today on Braadcast, we explore what it takes to believe in something long before everyone else does. Gerald, welcome to Braadcast. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure for us to have you here. And I'm so glad that you agreed. It took me a while to convince you to be here, but thank you. And for our viewers, I would like to introduce who you are and what you've done and your achievements, just to give them a better understanding of who is sitting across from me here today for the next hour. So Gerald has been a pioneer of change and beautifying and uplifting the Johannesburg CBD buildings and areas. And he's got an absolute legacy in transformation and making things better. And he's been doing so at the helm and leading that space in Johannesburg for over 40 years. And we're glad to have him here on the show, and Braadcast is very glad to have you here. And for the next hour, I'm going to dig deep and delve into how it all started and who Gerald Olitzki is, because I've dealt with you many times, and as tough as you are as a negotiator, you're very fair and you're absolutely always pleasant to deal with, and hence why you're sitting here today. And it's been a wonderful experience working with you and just seeing how you've done things. So Gerald, I have to take you back to the very beginning. Where did this all start? Where did you grow up?
Well, I'm a Joburg boy, born and bred. Grew up in Fairmount. Went to the local government school, that's Fairmount Primary School, went to Northview High School, all the government schools, and then eventually went to university.
And tell me, did you do sport at school? Because I always ask this question. I love to find out, because most property people, you'll find there's an undertone of competitiveness, and it comes sometimes from the sports field. Where did you get your competitiveness from?
Certainly, I played every sport there was. Normally, I played it pretty badly, but absolutely, whatever went, I played. Yeah.
And tell me, the varsity you went to Wits?
I went to Wits. I did my law degree at Wits. Yeah.
And you graduated and became an attorney, and you did your articles somewhere.
I did my articles. Well, in fact, what I did was I simultaneously did my articles with my studies. You know, I did articles in the day and studied at night due to financial circumstances.
So you don't come from money?
Oh, no, certainly not.
Okay,
certainly not.
So I mean, but I mean, it was very different those years. I mean, I don't think many, let's put it this way, there are a lot more wealthier families in Johannesburg in South Africa than there were those days. You know, they were the exception if you came from money or if you had money. We were a relatively new country, and there were self-made millionaires. So you had to navigate and work it all out for yourself, I think.
That is correct. No, I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And your practice, did you work for a while in a firm, or did you start your own business?
Well, it's interesting. I treated my articles, as I mentioned, I did articles simultaneously with the studies, and I very often used to miss lectures because I treated the articles as though it was a serious business. So by the time I qualified in 1977, I'd already built up a bit of a following. So the day I actually qualified, with a 2-month gap, I then opened my own practice in 1978. Okay. And what really happened was this: it was an interesting thing. You know, I won't mention the name of the firm that I was with, but they had previously had some substantial clients, and they treated those clients quite badly, and they'd lost those clients, and there were a few remaining matters. And when I got there, I thought to myself, this is, you can't treat people like this. And I climbed into those matters, and those 3/4 dead matters I revived. And lo and behold, when I went out on my own, happened to be American Express was the first.
Okay.
Lo and behold, a couple of months after I opened my doors, the general manager of American Express arrived at my door and said, would I like to do some of their work?
You had just graduated. You couldn't have been more than 25, 26?
No, you're absolutely right. I graduated in 1977. At that stage, I was 25.
Okay. I mean, but I think what comes through with a lot of successful business people is the self-belief to know that, and the confidence to know that you can actually do this on your own. You can do something better than what you're surrounded for. The one thing that one of the guests said is that they learned more about how not to be than how to be,
Right.
So obviously you took that and you've made it better. So you started, you had a few clients and you had your own practice at a very young age, and you, like everything else, build relationships and made them work for you?
Absolutely. Look, I've always believed that if you follow your passion, you'll do well at it.
And was law your passion?
Well, as a matter of interest, I studied 2 years of medicine.
No, you're kidding me.
No.
Oh, well, I thought I knew almost everything about you, but you studied medicine.
Just a matter of interest is, my father was a refugee. My parents were refugees from Germany just before the Second World War, and my father had wanted to be a doctor.
Okay.
And at the age of 13, he was sent out to sell eggs door to door. So he didn't have the opportunity to go to university, so I was going to be his doctor. Now, given the fact that I was useless at the sciences at school, this was a hopeless course to start with. So I did that for 2 years. And then I eventually said, listen, you want to be a doctor, go to university. And then I put myself into university, put myself through university, and followed my passion. So it was always following a passion. I've always had a strong sense of justice, and law was what was made for me at that time.
But you said you put you through. I mean, explain that a bit further, because you put you through. So did you work at night? Did you work during?
Well, what I did was I did my entire degree part-time. I worked during the day, studied at night, and paid my way up. I paid my own education, my own textbooks, my own transport, my own clothing, my own entertainment, for which, frankly, I'm very proud. Yeah.
So I know, you may know him. I don't know if you know the Schindlers, the attorney firm.
I've heard of them.
They immigrated. My father was best friends with the Schindlers, and they immigrated. The sons all went to, I think, Australia, but they did the same thing. I remember them studying till late hours. When we would go and visit their family, and what are they doing? What are you doing? No, studying law, and that's what I ended up studying. I went to go study and do law. But it's interesting. If you want to do it, you just have to do it. You make a way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you had your practice, and then obviously, what made you have to go quickly into this? Because I know there's a lot that you've done in property, but what made you decide that you wanted to be involved in property?
All right. Look, I think we have goals we start out in life with, and I always said to myself, if I retired one day and I owned my own home, had my own law practice, and owned the building in which my law practice was housed, I would have achieved my life's goals. Well, it's very nice that, in fact, you can outstrip your original dreams. So I then bought the building, funnily enough, that I did my articles in, was on a thing called Gandhi Square.
Oh, so your property that you bought, the first one
was the building that I did my articles in. And when I qualified and started my own practice, I came back to that building. In fact, I have a love affair with the building.
Okay.
And I then rented offices there, and eventually I bought the building. Okay, and it was an interesting way of buying it, because it took me a long time to get to the point where I could buy it. I had to build up a balance sheet in the law practice first.
Did you get finance for the property, or did you have to? Did the seller lend you a vending loan, or?
No, not at all. What happened, in fact, was that first I had to build up a balance sheet. So, having said that, I started practice in 1978. I bought my first building in 1989. So it's a good few years afterwards that I could manage to do it. But also I had the advantage of, at that stage, acting for the banks, and I had a credibility with the banks. And they actually gave me, for that first building, 100% finance, which is most unusual.
Those days are gone.
No. I'm not sure, Norman, if they ever were. But anyway, I managed to persuade.
But you're not the first person yet to tell me they got 100% finance. People don't believe us when we mean it's impossible.
Yeah, but the reality was, I went there and I said, listen, I'm paying a landlord X rand per month the rent, and I paid the grand sum of 1 million rand for a reasonably substantial building.
In 1989.
In 1989. And I said to the bank, listen, the bond, that million rand bond, is going to cost me the same as the rent I'm paying. So it's just, it's rent substitution.
But I mean, you bought a property. I mean, I might be, you might have to correct me, but just quite shortly after the Rubicon speech. No, or quite, I think.
It was 89.
It was 89. It was, yes, I'm not sure, maybe I'm getting my dates and things, what happened wrong, but you brought it when there was a lot of change in South Africa.
Yes.
And not everyone believed in the future of South Africa. I mean, I think at that time we were on this difficult, sensitive thing of whether we're going to abolish apartheid, and it was all happening at that time.
Absolutely. Well, those are the times that create the opportunity.
Yeah.
Now, it's the very reason that there was that opportunity. If you've got no money, you've got to go where others fear to go.
What made you think that was
the
right thing to do?
Right,
because, I mean, there was a lot of negativity. I was 18 at the time. I was in varsity.
Right.
And I remember we were part of the liberal Wits. We were big supporters of the change.
Right.
We were all part of it.
Indeed.
But there was a lot of negativity and a lot of resistance to what was going on. So, I mean, you obviously had a belief that this was the right thing to do.
Well, I didn't have that fear. There was that fear of change. What's going to happen? Are we going to have an uhuru or what? I was pretty left wing. I've always been that way. And,
I think 99% of Wits students were that way inclined.
But not always heartfelt. This was very heartfelt, and I knew some of the people in the struggle years, and I knew these were good people, and I knew these were people that that it was safe to see them in government, and so I backed that, and I actually fed on other people's fears. So because people, and this gave me the opportunity for the first many years of my property business to have opportunity, because again we'll discuss in a moment about people fleeing from the inner city, but that's a slightly different aspect of it. But as far as the change was concerned, I was quite confident that we'd have a nice stable government. That there wouldn't be any retribution against whites, etc., and that there would be fair play. And so I backed that. And obviously, when everybody else was trying to, offload property, this was my opportunity to unload.
Common thread is that of what happens is that when people work, when they buy, when they cry, and they sell when they yell, when they go again. I think that's a famous line from Nady.
Right.
I think I'm not sure if it was Nady Kirsch or whoever it was, but I remember someone saying that.
Okay.
And but you went against the grain when everyone else was actually nervous and uncertain, and you just believed that this was the way to go. And I mean, just you mentioned Vanderbijl Square.
Yeah.
I mean, it's now called Gandhi Square.
That's right.
I mean, that's how far it's changed. So you started buying, you bought your first property, but did you ever think you were going to be a property investor or mogul, or was it just one property? And when did you decide I needed to do more?
Look, I mentioned that I initially bought my first building, for purposes of housing my law practice. But what actually happened was that I bought this building. I managed to get a good tenant on the ground floor. I occupied, it was a ground plus 6 stories. I occupied 2 floors for my own practice, and I managed to successfully rent out to let the other floors to quality tenants. It took a bit of practice in advance to go look at different developments to see how one should do this sort of things successfully. Like anything, it required prior investigation. But eventually, I took this building, which cost me initially R1 million, which the banks then afterwards valued at several million rands. And that's when the penny dropped, that here's a massive opportunity, okay, linked with a conference that I had, which I'll explain to you in a moment. But then I bought the building next door. It happened to be coming available. So this was
and town was, at that stage, it was neat, it was clean, it was tidy. There was a lot of business in there, or had it started changing?
It was changing. That was the time. 89 was. Remember 89. We were talking. Transition was 94. 5 years prior to it, people were really panicking as to what's going to happen. We'd already started seeing people fleeing from the inner city, and I think that's an important discussion to have. Is that I watched people leaving. I watched companies leaving. And what was that all about? Okay, we might remember the Swartgevaar. Okay, here come the blacks, and there goes the city. And this was the prevailing view, and people said, "Let's go and move to the north and keep that European cocoon going." Okay, to me, this was nonsense, absolute, total nonsense, insanity, and. Again, I said, let other people's folly be my advantage, to my advantage. So when they decided to leave, I climbed on the bandwagon. So at that stage already, I'd anticipated that I could build a substantial portfolio. Then there was a building. You might remember there was an insurance company called Commercial Union.
Yes,
who had an entire city. Who had an entire city block. Okay, and then they sold out to Mutual Federal, and they sat with this entire city block between Rissik, Loveday, Fox, and that particular block. It must have been about 60, 70,000 square meters, and with everybody wanting to leave, like rats leaving a sinking ship. I looked at this with
glee.
With failure to understand what they're all about, because this was nonsense.
I mean, I'm an 80. So you're looking at it that way. I can tell you right now, 99% of everyone else is looking at it very differently.
They were, and they still are to some extent.
Yeah.
But yes. But the point is that particular block. So I approached the Commercial Union, came to me, and they said, "Listen, we understand. I'd bought already by that stage. I bought a few buildings." They came to me and said, within that immediate zone, and they came to me and they said, "Would you like to buy this one of the buildings?" I said, "I'll buy the whole block." They said, "Well, what do you want to pay?" I said, $1 million. So they said, "I'll come out of it." I said, "I'll up it to $1.5 million." And guess what? I bought about 60,000 square meters or thereabouts for $1.5 million. That's what was happening in those days. That's how.
I don't think people are going to believe you.
Well, go check in the deeds office. It's there,
60,000. But weren't you scared of the running costs and the costs of the rates and the taxes and the electricity costs you had to really let it out. It was vacant.
Well, Norman, you've got to have confidence in yourself, and you've got to have a vision. And I had a vision. Look. I started off in the early years, but by then I already developed a bit of a portfolio when I got to that particular one.
And on your own?
On my own.
Trial by error?
Well, I hope more trial than error, but anyway.
But I'm saying you were working through, and no one had given you the blueprint of what to do. I mean, you kind of worked it out yourself.
Well, Norman, I think, I've often said this, but I think the advantage I had was I had no formal training in this stuff. I had no blueprint. So that gave me license to think outside the box, because it was a very, very unique situation, with unique circumstances.
And I often see in the corporate world and just in everywhere, this is the way it's done, this is the way it should be done, this is the way you must continue to do it. And then the disruptor comes along and he says, "No, I think it should be done this way." And they're the ones that actually end up being more successful than anyone.
Right.
I'm saying, I'm trying to see that.
Yeah, but that might be true. But in this particular case, there was no blueprint for this.
Yeah.
There was no precedent for what was happening.
Yeah.
People madly leaving. I mean, it was madness, Norman. If I say to you that people were abandoning their buildings. I've often mentioned this anecdote, but there was a particular case that I know of that a guy one night locked up his building and never came back. Okay, so what actually happened? I mean, this for me was the incentive to go more and more and more. People said, here come the blacks and there goes the city, and that was the absolute nonsense, And so they actually caused the problem themselves. Why? Because by fleeing, they left a vacuum. Now, what does a vacuum attract? The homeless and the criminal element. And these buildings were starting to get occupied by the homeless and the criminal element. So they sat in their ivory towers in Sandton saying, look, we told you so. Look, the city's going. And this was nonsense. So I decided I'm going to confront all this. And I had my ways of dealing with vacating the buildings with a sort of a humane kind of approach. We can talk about that later if you wish. But, these buildings were getting thrown at me for next to nothing, okay? But how you ask about the holding costs, okay? You talk about holding costs. I'd had sort of a knowledge and an association with trade unions and with this sort of thing, and there were lawyers and quality accountants, etc., that were practicing accountancy law, whatever you, in really horrible offices. Okay, and this was the concept that I had, was that I use the example. If I take the best French perfume and I stick it in a Coca-Cola bottle, I'm not going to sell it. Because the packaging is no good. So I always had the attitude, you've got these quality lawyers, these are quality accountants in a Coca-Cola bottle, in surroundings that don't really work for them. So I said, what I tried to do was approach them. I went literally door to door to myself, to the lawyers, to the accountants, and I'll talk about the trade unions in a moment. But I brought them in. I gave them for the money that they were paying in these downtrodden offices. I was giving them really decent offices, and this is a momentum that feeds on itself. That eventually I didn't even have to go look for them anymore. They started looking for me. But if I say trade unions, again, because I had an association at that stage, I knew the good guys and the bad guys, but you mentioned trade union to any landlord and they said, we don't go near it. So I welcomed them in, and I did a lot of business, still do a lot of business with the trade unions. So when there was no other tenants at the time, I mean, we now deal with we've got different in our portfolio. We've got buildings that are for startups. For brand new businesses. We've got buildings which are entirely occupied by the big corporates, okay? Because we've evolved along the way, but it all started with the little guys. Yeah.
And you said there's no good buying and beautifying a building while the street remains dilapidated.
Well, that was the big picture. That was the big picture. So I started accumulating these buildings. Now, you mentioned Vanderbijl Square, which I later renamed Gandhi Square. We can discuss that as well as to why Gandhi, but still. So in the days when Joburg was at its peak, Vanderbijl Square was the pits. It was the worst part of Joburg. It was really a place that was the haven for glue sniffers, hobos, pickpockets. All it was a bus holding facility.
That's where the buses,
you might remember,
arrived and left.
Absolutely, and in between the lower end.
Up until it wasn't a long time ago until they changed it all. The buses were going there.
No, the buses still go there. I'll explain that.
But you've stopped it from going into those other areas.
No. What has happened is it was a bus holding facility.
Yes.
So I spent many years just to deal with the concept of environment, as you raised a moment ago. It was for me. It was great to have good buildings, developed good buildings, but it's no good having good buildings in a bad environment. So part of it, the beauty of what I was doing was this: I felt you're doing something socially positive as well as in my own interest. Okay, so I negotiated for many years until I finally got a private lease over this Vanderbijl Square, which I renamed Gandhi Square. It was our private money that revamped that square, okay? And that was the beginning of a bigger game, a much bigger game, okay? But what it did was it created, as you referred to it a moment ago, a more holistic experience. You had decent offices and decent buildings in a decent environment. But more than that, I worked very closely at that stage. Partnerships are very important. And I worked with two wonderful gentlemen. There was a guy, Neil Fraser, who ran a thing called the Central Johannesburg Partnership, and another great guy by the name of Graham Read, who then ran the Johannesburg Development Agency.
And where did the City Improvement District?
Well, this is exactly where I'm getting to. It's exactly where I'm getting to. Between us, we brought the improvement districts into South Africa.
Okay.
So this was a concept which we brought into South Africa. Okay. To give due credit, Neil led the team on that one, Neil Fraser. Okay, but we together brought the improvement districts, which, as you know, are everywhere in the country today. It was on the basis of, where the city doesn't have the ability or the means to look after itself, God helps those who help themselves. So this is what we did. We brought the improvement districts. That together with the money we invested in fixing up the areas, together with improving the buildings themselves, created the whole node that is now actually works.
It's like in you have children, I have kids, and it's like anything in life. Your kids, they hang out with one. They can have 10 friends, but if one friend of theirs is not good,
right?
Then it's not good.
Right.
You know what I'm trying to say? Right. That one building could be bad, could bring all the others down. And I think that was what we saw in a lot of areas in Johannesburg. Just one hijacked building could really take an area and completely deteriorate it, because everyone starts losing hope, interest, confidence, and then they start leaving their buildings, and another one becomes available, and then there's another hijacked building. Well, so you just try to get your grip on it.
What you say is 100% correct. Decline is progressive. But so is
improvement,
rejuvenation. So what was really happening was this, okay, is that I tried to buy up as many buildings in my node. I chose a node, which effectively was from the Magistrates Court on the west to the Carlton Centre on the right, in the east, Commissioner Street to the north, and Marshall Street to the south. And I tried to buy as many buildings as I could. But it's the old story, when somebody in the street begins to paint their house, it's amazing how everybody else starts doing it. So the buildings that I didn't buy, people started.
Well, there was competition now.
Yeah,
the tenants could, am I going to leave my building and go to your building, or we're going to have to do something about our building?
But it also instills confidence in other people that there's something happening, and maybe it's worth their improving their buildings too. So we had this total upward motion, upward movement of the area, and it's I think it becomes very stark, because if you look at the city today, the Marshalltown area, which is the zone that I've given attention to, is so distinctly different to the other parts, which again we could talk about that as a separate topic. But the reality is this: is that everybody came to the party. Once we had these improvement districts, our concept of improvement districts was all property owners contributed to the upkeep, the security, the cleanliness of the area, and it worked.
So, I'll tell this for our viewers. I've been to your offices, been to your building, and the most magnificent views from where we met, and boardrooms, beautiful. You wouldn't think that you're anywhere outside of the best area of South Africa, and in the best building, whether it be the Sandton City, which you say possibly or Menno or Cape Town, you wouldn't know that you anywhere. Your buildings are absolutely perfect. I mean, they just the way they do it, the way you offer it, and there's no reason why anyone wouldn't want to be there once they're in there. Obviously, there is challenges around there. But tell me and tell us what was the most difficult problems that you had in the city. I mean, obviously that you spoke about the neglected buildings, but talk us through some of the other challenges.
Look, there was a challenge in acquiring the private leases. Private leases I wanted over Gandhi Square. We eventually, as you know, did Main Street. We did Fox Street. We now hold leases over those. There were challenges in those, but the real challenges we had were economic challenges. When interest rates went through the ceiling, things like that. Those were difficult times.
You must have missed the first one in the 80s. I think that's when we just spoke about. You just started buying your first building straight after that.
No, 98 was the one that hit me hard.
And 2001.
And 2001. But 98, we were just recovering from 98 when we got hit again. But in 98, I remember the prime rate went from 9% to 27%. 27%. Okay, so that's three times that So it was. Those were difficult times. I mean, it was literally hanging on.
And were you exposed to one bank or many banks? Or
I was exposed to two banks.
Okay.
I was exposed to two banks.
And did you think this was the end?
Never ever thought it was the end.
Okay.
You know what? The minute you put it in your head that there's any chance that it's the end, then it is the end.
Yeah.
You've got to believe.
I'm glad you said that.
You've got to believe that there's always a way out of the hole. Okay,
I'm glad you said that. That's something to remember. The minute you think it's the end, it is the end.
Well, it's a case of positive thinking. But
did you know how long it would last for? Or did you think it was a short-term problem?
Norman, you lived from day to day. As I say, I had a very successful law practice. Okay,
still going.
No. I gave it up a number of years ago.
Okay.
It was time to give full attention to the property side.
Okay.
It was actually sad to say goodbye because I'd kept the same clients for 30 years.
Okay.
And quality clients, but you've got to make a decision in life. But it was a transition. I moved into it. It was fine. Yeah.
Okay. And then again in 2001, came back just when you thought, okay, gee, I can breathe for a little bit.
Right. Well, more about that, Norman. I was the youngest developer at that stage. There were 9 major developers. Yeah. Okay. When the dust settled, I was the youngest, but when the dust settled, the other 8 were gone. Literally
from the financial crisis.
They literally were put out of business. They were made bankrupt.
Okay. So what did you do differently? I mean, how did you work it out? Was it your relationship with the bank? Was it your gearing that you had? But what did you do?
All of the above. Okay. It was a situation where for starters, I mean, I'll tell you about some of the toughies, But yes, I had a good law practice, and that had to heavily subsidize the situation. I had tremendous relationships with the bank. You see, in my law practice, my clients were substantially the banks. Okay, so I had a trust. But despite that, Nedbank actually called up my loans. Okay, and I spent 3 weeks trying to persuade them. What the attitude was: look, the other guys have all gone. Okay, we need to just make what we can out of what's left of your business. And I literally, I went to the bank manager. I got a negative answer. I went over his head until I reached the biggest guy I could reach at the bank. I think she persuaded the guy that I shouldn't be treated like anybody else. That here's my business plan. This is where I'm at, and I'm glad I'm here to tell the story. Those weren't easy years. I might also add that I never asked the bank for rescheduling of the debt. I paid my bond every month. I paid my salaries every month. I met my obligations. Sometimes I wonder how the heck I did do it, but I'm still here to tell the story.
And the biggest challenge in town, the biggest development that you did, the biggest project that you took on that you can say, look back and say, wow, that's something I'm really proud of. And
I think, look, I'll tell you the thing I'm most proud of in the entire operation. Okay, and you may find this a little strange, is the fact that it's got nothing to do with property. It's got to do with people.
Okay.
Is that every time I developed another building, I created X number of jobs. And when we put all the security on the streets, we're creating jobs. I think the thing I'm most proud of is the tens of thousands of jobs that have been created through my property endeavors. So I think that possibly, you may find this strange, but I believe that was of all the achievements, that was probably the greatest.
Okay, so that's wonderful. I mean, what would you want anything more? That's beautiful. I think
we want a bit more, but
everyone's chasing, man.
Of course.
Everyone wants to be successful, financially independent, wealthy, and you want to build something that you can have a legacy. But I think the greatest fulfillment, everyone, is when you give something back, and you can't measure it by money.
Well,
it's like a charity, but it's not even a charity.
That's not a charity.
It's employment, and it's jobs, and it's something.
But Norman,
contribution. You're leaving the place better off than it was.
But I'm a great believer, and it's one of the reasons why I let my kids do what they want to do. Okay, is I believe that if you do something with passion and with integrity and with the right motives, and you don't make profit the primary motive, okay, you're going to make profit.
Yeah,
you're going to get there, and you're going to do well.
Yeah. And I think you've done that. But I'm saying you stabilized in the early 2000s, because that's when I first met you. And I love to tell the story because it was possibly the best era for me in property. It was wonderful to see. I met you, and I loved him, Alec Wapnick. He was a beautiful human being. I loved him, and I was broken when he passed away.
We were all there.
And there were other. You had the likes of Afco and Wayne and Rennie Plitt.
Right.
They were emerging players in the market in the early 2000s. And there was Gerald Olitzki, who's already done it. Yeah, he was the boss of the CBD.
Not the boss.
And Alec was. City Properties were operating in Pretoria. They hadn't really started to play. And then,
well, I can tell you a story about that.
Yeah. And then there were Sanlam and Old Mutual, and they were all selling off their big portfolios in the CBDs across the country. And then there was this competitive bidding war from between the three of you,
which Norman Raad really enjoyed.
But more than that, it was wonderful to watch that people had belief and confidence in the city. And they were doing something about it. And, those days, yes, they were glory days of the property scene. There's a wave that everyone was catching and they were riding. But there were big players, and they were putting a lot of money. And even though they were cheap at the price, you were investing a considerable amount of money into the city, all of you.
Of course.
And you were adding, making things better, and investing in the CBD. Tell us about some of those years, because you'd won many auctions, you'd won the highest bid, and you'd also lost some of them.
Of course.
You were chasing certain properties. I remember anything that came in your domain, in your area, you wouldn't let it go. And Alec was a fighter. Possibly the best fighter of them all. And he just loved to know that he was.
But when the dust settled, actually, we worked very closely together.
Yeah.
But look, you touched on the fact that the Old Mutuals and all of them left the city and offloading their buildings. The irony is this: today, the same guys, that's the same companies that sold me buildings are now my tenants. Okay, which is ironic. But having said that, now Alec did try play a bit in the office space, which is where we play. Where I play. But eventually, when things settled down, when the dust settled, we were actually great for each other, because this created a situation where they did the residential
and retail.
And the retail, but not so much the offices. They had the occasional office building, but in the end, I think most of the office buildings they let go anyway. In fact, there's an interesting story where Alec actually came to you one day and said, "I'll stick to my knitting and you stick to yours." But so the competitiveness in the bidding actually died down afterwards. You may or may not have noticed, but the fact is he had his stuff, and the Plits had their stuff, all the residential stuff, which was not in competition with me. In fact, it worked beautifully with my stuff, because if you've got residential accommodation together with decent office accommodation, the two go hand in hand.
I'll tell you a funny story I've never told you before.
Yeah.
Alec said to me, there's an auction going on huge properties, and he said, "I'm not coming. I don't want anyone to know that I'm bidding." but you're going to bid for me. And I don't care what it goes for. I will be the highest bidder. He said, so I had this like blank check to carry on.
That's trust. That's trust. Okay.
And he wasn't there. He said, I'm not coming. I'm not going to be there. And you got to make sure that and I know that Gerald's going to be there. I know that the Wayne's going to be there. And I think there were one or two other players. And he said, you make sure I get that property. Mm-hmm. And I bid until until it was actually a funny story. He said, obviously, he had a discussion and he didn't want to compete with some of them, but he just needed the property. It was quite interesting. Those were the best, actually, years
for you. For sure. Not so much for us. But no, as I say, in the end, there was literally nothing. We didn't collude to say, you go, I'm not bidding against you. It was that they had their zone. And we had our zone. So you could pretty much say that Commissioner Street became almost the boundary between two countries. So they were north and I was south of it.
But what happened then? Because soon after that era, there was obviously the credit crisis, 2008, 2009. There was a money problem. There was a development problem, finance problem. A lot of things slowed down in the country, never mind just the city. Yes. But the lower end really got hurt hard. Where did it really, because I mean, the city was still there was money going in and development and investment. And even though Old Mutual was out, they had these investment arms like Future Growth that they were behind. They were pumping more money. They're pumping money into the city, and Sanlam were pumping money into the city. Where did the city decay? I mean, because it took a terrible turn at around that time after it really got progressively worse. Why? And why?
Well, no, I want to stop right there, okay? The city, you say the city declined, okay? The city's a thing of different parts. The part that I'm involved with has never decayed. Okay, if you walk there, you have walked there.
It's freely, security.
You can walk.
Beautiful.
Within that zone, you're actually safer, statistically, you're safer than in Rosebank or Sandton. Okay, it's not known out there. And this is why I value this opportunity to put that kind of stuff out. But it's a tale of two cities there, because our part is safe, it's clean, it's a pleasure to be there. And there are parts of the city that I wouldn't dream of walking in because they're unsafe. So we must be careful not to generalize about the city.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
So in fact, the part that I'm involved in, that whole Marshalltown area that I described a while back, is getting better and better as we talk. In fact, it's what we're actually doing is we slowly extending the boundaries of this good area by growth.
But there's also been some, like we've seen Standard Bank, a large part of their business move out of the city. We've seen Absas move out of the city, F&B. Surely there should be an incentive to want to stay there. I mean, surely if they invested more in their properties and if they invested more in their businesses to be there in the security, it could be like that all over the city and not just in your area.
Right. Well, look, the answer to that is not simple. Okay. The first aspect is this. Yes, I think the city or the country, whoever, should incentivize, should create incentives for people to be in the city, to work from the city, to invest in the city. That's fine, that's great. Okay, but there's another reality, and the other reality is this: that the city will never die. Why will the city never die? You talk about ABSA. You talk about. Let's use the banks as that example. Okay, there's certain parts of the bank and certain banks. I'll say Investec, Deutsche Bank. These people, where they essentially employ from the northern suburbs, and they cater for the northern suburbs types. They will forever be in the northern suburbs, in Rosebank or Sandton. Where these banks are, we've still got those bank presence in the city. Where they employ from a broader geographical area, and where they cater for the greater population, they'll always be in the city. So there's a place for Sandton, there's a place for the city, unknown to people. People think of the city as dead, but there's still a very big bank presence in the city. And so it'll remain, I believe.
And every couple of years, there's a new change of leadership within the city. I mean, sometimes there's like all of the new paint, new broom sweeps clean. And I'm saying, do you think we need? I mean, obviously, a bit of stability to get it right. Do you think do you have the belief that can come right? Because I think there is a lot going on. We've sold a lot of buildings to residential developers, and I can tell you categorically that some of our developers have grown exponentially, and they've turned really terrible buildings into beautiful buildings.
Absolutely.
And the student accommodation, especially touching on Bromfontein, a huge amount of money have been spent there. You just got to go walk into it. You always think you're walking into an apartment in Sandton.
Right.
But the vision for the future of the city, do you think there's going to be some stability going forward?
Well, look, I think what we need is this. I think the city's got the city fathers have got to look at themselves and perhaps do a better job.
Okay.
I mean, there's these power outages, the water outages, the infrastructure is not in good condition. That needs a strong hand and a big investment to make it work.
Because the retail in Joburg CBD is flying. It's still
unbelievable. It's terrific.
Busy.
Absolutely.
The residential, it's convenient for people to live and work and still work and stay in the area. And some of the developments and the upgrades, I mean, just we took Ponty to auction. I mean, what they've done there is incredible. I mean, they've turned it around. They made it really beautiful. Once you're in there, you never have to leave. There's retail, there's all and it's clean and it's nice. But around Ponty,
well, Norman, this touches on something you mentioned earlier. Ponty in isolation. I'm not sure that it's sustainable. Okay, you've got to have a good building in a good environment. Unless there's a specific constituency that wants to be in that building. I don't know. But generally speaking, you've got to have a good environment around your building for it to be long-term sustainable.
Looking back, you're sitting. Okay, but I shouldn't go there first. COVID. I think that was also a challenge for you.
Look, it was a challenge for everybody, But look, albeit that we seen sort of as being quite brave, or sometimes people call it reckless. It's not true, I've always done things slowly, and I've always done it building by building. I've only developed another building when I've put the previous building to bed. So I don't go take 10 buildings and try to do 10 buildings at once. And being conservative in that regard saw me well through COVID. That we had reserves, we had the ability to survive it. So we weren't particularly hurt by COVID.
Okay, so well done. I mean, not many property owners can say the same. They're massive challenges.
Yeah. But the secret, Norman, is a balance between being bold and being conservative. I mean, it sounds contradictory, but you can have both elements tied together.
Yeah. And were there any regrets looking back that you should have done more of or less of, or you shouldn't have done this or that? I mean, looking back at your 30 year from 40 years.
No, on the contrary, even the bad times, Norman, were challenging. They were growth periods. I sort of try to get the positive out of it. But on the contrary, if I look back, I think the achievement I could not have predicted. It's certainly been more successful than I even thought initially that I could set out to achieve. So I don't think there's any regret that I could particularly think of.
And looking forward, what is your vision? What have you got confidence in? What are your plans and looking forward into the future? Do you want to just carry on one building at a time, one area at a time? Do you plan to maybe move your development and your growth into other areas, a bit expand?
Well, I've touched on that just now. Basically, our playground is a big playground. So there's enough for us to keep on going for a long, long time. I did mention to you that on the edges, we slowly push those edges by increasing the good area. But it's not an idea, no thought. I mean, I've been asked in the past whether I'd be interested in sort of replicating what I've done in Durban and in other centres, and I've said no, because there's more than enough. Joburg's a big city, and we've fortunately managed to recapture, if you can call it that, big swathes of the city. And we continue to do so. There's still plenty that has to be done. That city still has a lot of potential.
I'd love to see what they've got in Singapore recently. They've got, and I see they've built one towards an old Standard Bank land there on the side of the highway, a soccer field. They've got in the middle of these buildings in Singapore, they've got these sports fields, these football fields. I mean, they've taken a limited space, an amount of land, and they've created this like cultural environment where there's space for concerts and music and sports fields, and they've got these high rises around you. Maybe they can take some of the old buildings and bash them down and break them down and do a park in the center of Joburg CBD.
Well, Norman, as I mentioned, residential is not my bag at all. But having said that, I think they're going to have to, because more and more people are living in the city. You have to create the amenities. Now, at the moment, we've got singles, couples, not many kids in the city. If we want the residential to expand, what you suggest has got to happen. We've got to create maybe churches, mosques, whatever and sports fields. But that should be something that I think should be in the future of Johannesburg.
Yeah, and some of the other like areas of that you've invested in, I mean, they all seem to be stable and doing well, or do you still find that there's some difficulty in where you are? It's retail. What do you think the most opportunity is there going forward? Retail, commercial?
Look, we do retail and commercial only. We don't do residential, as I mentioned. If I were to tell you that I don't think I have any retail space available at all, and I think our office occupancy, other than brand new buildings that we're just busy setting up now, in the high 90s occupancy. That's I think that's probably a lot more than the average for the entire country. So when people say, "Where's the future of Johannesburg?" Well, there's the answer. I mean, it's happening.
And government and business participation and collaboration and JVs and things like that, should there be more of? Obviously, I would assume that they'd be running to the likes of you and business people to say, listen, help us here. Let's partner us on these buildings that are, I mean, do you think that there's a space and there's an opportunity to continue?
Look, I've mentioned Graham Reed to you previously. He ran the Johannesburg Development Agency, which is a city office. And in those days, we had the most incredible cooperation with each other. That's how we managed to get the private leases on Gandhi Square, Fox Street, Main Street, etc. Of late, the cooperation is less. Okay. We've offered our assistance to the city. We haven't really had that much of a response. I think we could definitely improve in that area.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll get there. And tell me, the guy Gary and Anton,
right?
The team that is now taken over a little bit. You've allowed them to run a little bit they're invested in the business with you. You've given them opportunity. They worked for you for many years. Really good guys. Nice, really, really good guys. I mean, I don't say that lightly because they're wonderful to work with. Their plans, obviously, is to continue the legacy and grow.
Well, I'd been through lots and lots of young guys and girls that to look to. As I mentioned, my kids didn't want to become involved in the business, but I'd been through a lot of youngsters to try to find people. These are the two guys that I found that were the very best. And over the years, they've gained experience. They're fantastic, and I think that's one of the most important things in a business is that the founder of the business mustn't jealously hang on to his business. He's got to give the people space to grow, space to make mistakes, But they've got to learn. And these two guys you mentioned have excelled, and they really do a fantastic job. They know their stuff. And one day, when I can no longer be part of the business, I'll be quite comfortable with I'm looking at it from here or looking at it from over there. I'll be quite comfortable that it's in good hands.
Did you ever deal with Jonathan Broll?
Never. No, I never had any connection with Jonathan Broll.
Okay.
No.
So never did any lease in there.
No.
And tell me, what would you describe the one character trait that to be a successful business person they would require need for a youngster? What do you think is one ingredient? Gary Player says you got to have it.
Okay.
For you as you can't take anything away from you. I mean, and you come in, you stand here, and you stand here with humility because there's no arrogance about you, and you sit in here, and it's wonderful to have you. But what is the one character trait that you need as a businessman, as a youngster, to succeed?
Okay. Well, it's not just one character trait, but I say the most important is passion. If you've got passion, if you're passionate about what you do, I honestly believe you've got the best chance of success.
Okay. And if you had to describe in a sentence your philosophy to this, would you just say something along the same lines, passionate?
Well,
okay.
And if you can find, as I have, something that combines the ability, and not necessarily in this order, to make money, to do something you like, and to do some good along the way in what you're doing, you'd have nothing more to ask for.
There's a double question I'm going to ask you here, because the youngsters coming through to now, I'm going to ask you what advice would you give them, and you've said that just have passion, do follow, and what you love.
Absolutely.
I've already answered that. But how easy would it be to get finance? I mean, are the banks still investing in town and financing, taking risk and lending in Johannesburg CBD, or is it a lot more difficult
I
now?
think it's a lot more difficult. It's a lot. Look, there've been some failures. There've been people coming into the market that didn't know what they were doing. If the banks have, to some extent, burnt their fingers on certain people, and they're now cautious. So I think it's a lot more difficult for them to get finance in the city. I can't speak for outside.
And if you had a wish list to the city and say, listen, yeah, these are all your abandoned buildings and these are your neglected buildings.
Right.
How would your picture be to them and your proposal to say, listen, give them or partner, or how would that look?
Okay, look.
Because you've got the recipe.
Right. Okay. So
you're happy to part the recipe. You're doing it with your people within your own company. You're not looking for glory. And I think you've achieved enough wealth and financial success. This is all more about an improvement and a legacy going forward. It should be taken and received well.
Norman, you mentioned earlier on about the one rotten apple in the barrel kind of thing, that there's one that could spoil the area. We have those. Mm. Now, for example, without being specific, there's a block in my zone which is pretty much abandoned. Okay. I have approached this again and again, tried to approach the authorities to say the following. Why leave it? These people owe a fortune in arrear rates and taxes, etc. Do something with it. They're saying that the legal fees, etc., that are involved in taking this process is prohibitive. And I'm saying the following. I'm saying, listen, in my zone, I would do this, and in other zones that are for other people, they will do the following. Why don't you take the property? I will underwrite that I will bid a sub-minimum of your legal costs and your rates and taxes, okay? Put it on auction. Go to Norman Raad and put it on auction. But the bottom line of it is this: is that if somebody else bids higher, it's an open thing. Wonderful. You're not guaranteeing it to me, but I will guarantee a sub minimum to make it viable for you to do these things. And unfortunately, they haven't taken me up on that. If they were to do that, okay, we could clean up a lot of the bad buildings.
What advice can you give a 23-year-old graduating, finishing his law degree, accounting degree, property studies? What advice could you give them?
Just what I said before, Norman. Find out, we all
what you love. Find out what you love.
We've innately got something that we can identify with, something that we feel passionate about, follow your passion. Follow your passion. And this is the third time I probably mentioned that.
Yeah.
But follow your passion and the rest will fall into place. I do believe that. Obviously, you've got to work hard. You can't be stupid about it. So it's not passion alone is not going to do it. But that is the founding ingredient of success.
Well, it's been an unbelievable hour. We've crammed it into the space, but I mean, what an unbelievable journey. And you've had challenges, you've had difficulties, you've navigated a world, you've built relationships, and you've succeeded, and you've passed on the legacy to others, and you're willing to contribute even further. I just want to say congratulations. Well done for what you've achieved. And it's been wonderful to be part of, not only to watch and to hear and to hear the name, but to be sitting here with you. And I just want to wish you all the very, very best for you and your team. And I'm looking forward to your signature on future buildings in the CBD. And hopefully they'll listen and heed to your advice and maybe get you more inclusive. And we're glad you stuck around and you didn't immigrate like a lot of other people, and that you managed to make a change. Because just imagine if that area wasn't Gandhi Square, it was Vanderbilt Square. I can certainly tell you it wouldn't be the same as it is today. You've certainly made a difference, and I think everyone owes you something. I know that you don't want anything, but thank you. And it's much appreciated by us in the property industry, and I think everyone can look back and see what a wonderful achievement that we can write and talk about and see and walk it. And we wish you the very, very best into the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here.
And we appreciate our relationship with you.
No, that's the easy part. Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Hello, it's Norman from Braadcast, and I'd just like to thank all our subscribers and our viewers for following us and for participating and listening to all our unbelievable speakers, for them sharing their journey with us and just going over what has made them the entrepreneurs that they are today, from the lessons that they've made, the mistakes that they've made and the lessons that they've learned, and how they've shared it with us. I mean, it's been absolutely wonderful to be part of them, and I'm looking forward to our future guests. The experience that I've had sitting alongside some of these titans of the industry, I think I'll be remembered for the rest of my life. And we look forward to many more to come. So continue following us, continue subscribing, and we look forward to sharing a lot more insightful journeys with some of these great people in our industry. From me, goodbye, and I hope you have a wonderful day.